live. All right, everyone. Welcome back to AGRITECTURE's digital conference series. I'm Ricky Stevens, AGRITECTURE's Director of Digital Strategy. And we are here with Don Davidson from 3M. So Don, I am going to kick it over to you to give a little bit of an intro, and then we'll get into your slides.
Sounds great. Ricky, thanks so much for allowing me to join you today, and I'm thrilled to be able to connect here with your audience. And so I'm Don Davidson with 3M, and I work within kind of a unique cross-functional role as a business specialist where I work with our corporate R&D scientists along with our divisional technical teams to identify what are some of the world's big megatrends where science and innovation can be used to provide unique solutions for the emergence of these trends, and then combine the appropriate 3M technologies to then develop new solutions, new markets, and new commercialized products for that industry. So that's the work that I do in a broad scope, and then I'll be thrilled to be able to kind of tell you a little bit more about some of the topics regarding agriculture and food technology that we're involved with.
That's great. And Don, let me ask you just, why 3M? Why is 3M interested in the future of food and agriculture?
Yeah, I know. I think it's really kind of centered around a simple burning question. As we are racing towards 9+ billion people here over the next couple of decades, what are the solutions that are needed to, provide the nutritional offerings for a population, but in a way that minimizes any type of negative impact on environment, public health, food security, and scarce natural resources. And so this definitely fits in with kind of what we're doing in terms of where any type of new project technology needs to be benchmarked to some sort of sustainability index. So the emergence of these high-tech forms of food production fits right into that scope.
Very cool. And let me just ask you, because when I hear 3M, my mind goes more towards materials and all of the things that you guys produce that we use on a daily basis. I'm sure on our audience's mind, they're definitely thinking of some of the personal protective material that you guys create, such as masks. What has 3M been doing? What's the last few weeks been like at 3M, even though you're not working directly right now in that department? How does your daily life change, and how has the company changed in the last few weeks to handle the COVID-19 response?
Sure. It's definitely an atypical situation, as pretty much everybody can understand. And really, with our portfolio of personal safety equipment, so it's just ramping up as much production as possible, mobilizing the production and supply chain teams on that, working with our individual plants that are scattered literally around the world to have their facilities running as efficiently as possible. And so that's just one part. That's the personal safety side. Another part is, 3M does a lot within packaging, whether it's something as straightforward as box sealing tape and packaging equipment, just to keep food companies running along efficiently. So really, it's just really mobilizing all of our resources possible to provide these solutions in a very interesting time.
Got it. That's good to hear. And do you feel like, has everybody around the company that you've been talking to, is it like overdrive? Are you guys putting in long hours, or had you already been playing out these scenarios at all? Like, has it been somewhat, I don't want to use the term chaos, but a little bit chaotic, and feeling like everyone's putting in extra hours? Or is it sort of like there'd been a scenario developed already where people just shift into this other mode?
It's unique being a global company, and we have 91,000 employees scattered around the planet. We have, basically office locations in nearly every single cultural capital on this planet. So with this being a global issue, it's basically kind of identifying like where this first started, and our teams there were quickly mobilized to provide solutions. And now that it's coming on strong here in the U.S. and Europe, we're basically trying to do the best we can with the same approach.
Got it. All right. Well, I'll let you. We'll shift gears and get into your actual presentation here. Get back into future of food and agriculture. And I know you're working on solutions across a variety of different types of forms of food production. For this presentation, and we're going to focus mainly on alternative protein. We'll get maybe in the Q&A to some of the things that you're working on in the controlled environment agriculture world and the regenerative farming world. All of it has been really exciting from the past conversations you and I have had. But for now, I think the alternative protein stuff, you've really, I've learned a lot from you on this front. So I think this will be an exciting convo. And with that, I will kick it over to you and try not to interrupt at all.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, Ricky. Appreciate it. All right. So I'll kind of start with just like broad 3M vision. I mean, this is really it in three simple sentences. 3M technology advancing every single company. And this is on the planet. 3M products enhancing every home, and 3M innovation improving every life. And really, for me, it's that last line. That's really kind of what sparked my interest in agriculture and food technology solutions. It's identifying, every single human being needs to be able to eat. With this growing population and those the challenges that I mentioned in the opening, that's what kind of sparked this original aha of we have different technologies that we can provide in this space of sustainable food production. I'll share with you a little bit about how we do that. So, I think one of the key themes that we're identifying in the alternative protein space is that it's the convergence of multiple technologies. And so when we see that and we hear from customers, here are the needs that we have, here are the challenges that we're facing, here's what's going to help us get from the initial pilot scale on up to industrial scale production. We can then take that insight then and work with our scientists and engineers who are specialists in every single one of these technology platforms. This is the entire 3M technology portfolio. And what the way that works is that when we identify very unique challenges, opportunities, and new markets that are evolving, it's the convergence of these unique 3M technology platforms that results in new commercialized products. And so we're looking to connect with whether it's plant-based meat companies, cell-based meat companies, fermented protein companies, to identify what are the needs that they have in their scale-up process, and then we mobilize our 3M teams accordingly to assist with those efforts. So why alternative proteins? And I kind of alluded to this in the opening. We have this growing global population, and if any of you are, have ever had experience, with the conventional meat industry, I mean, there's obvious challenges. There's parts of it that are just not, whether it's efficient or sustainable. So that's kind of how we started to think about this, is that once we started to connect with these companies, we quickly realized that we have a lot within our 3M technology wheelhouse that can assist with this marketplace. It was not obvious at first. I had to do a lot of voice of customer calls, as we call them, to learn what are the biggest challenges that they're facing with the most important parts of their business. And that was basically my approach to develop that. And so that's why I'm excited to be able to share this with you, because I've learned this over the past couple of years, and just out of the sheer realization that this is a very accelerating industry. It seems to be not slowing down by any means, and there's increasing needs for this industry around the world.
Don, just quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry if I missed this in the intro. How long have you been looking into sort of alternative agriculture?
So this was originally born out of, once I heard about, there was a researcher in the Netherlands, Dr. Mark Post, who first presented the original prototype of cell cultured meat in London back in 2013. So it was quickly after that I can't say I acted on it immediately right after that, but it was always kind of in the back of my mind of, this idea of cellular agriculture, production of protein directly from animal stem cells or from plant cells. That's something to keep an eye on.
Got it. And then it was so you kind of were following the space for a little while, and then it was a couple of years until this started bleeding a little bit into your work at 3M.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Got it. Helpful. Yeah.
Thanks for asking that. Yeah. So, and what I've learned that's really critical is like the solutions for this industry is not an or solution, meaning it's either conventional animal protein or alternative proteins. It really is the collective solution that can be offered, and so if we kind of look at the ideal global solution for sustainable protein production, it's going to be one part conventional protein, preferably high animal welfare, grass-fed, pasture-raised, plus plant-based protein, plus cell-based protein, plus other alternative proteins like fermented proteins. For the simple reason, I think that even if you talk to the existing cell-based meat companies and plant-based meat companies, there's a lot to learn from the conventional meat industry. I mean, they have meat scientists. They've been doing this for a long time. They have very efficient production facilities. They know the scale up of this. They have the supply chain knowledge. So that's where a lot of knowledge, and so this isn't to say like we want to keep the conventional meat players on the sideline and kind of force them out. No, in reality, there's a lot to learn from these companies. And so that's why I really strongly feel that this is a collective solution where it needs to be very inclusive across the space. the thing that we always kind of keep in mind with as we are talking with companies in the space is being focused on the key market drivers. Everything, there's a lot of advantages about the alternative protein industry, but if it doesn't meet these three criteria: price, taste, convenience, none of this stuff works. Nothing works at all. And so really that's my mindset in developing technology solutions. What are the technologies that are needed to bring down the price of these end products? Because yes, in the short term, it will be priced as a premium product. But I think the ultimate goal here is to have this at price parity of conventional protein, or probably even price below. That would be the ideal scenario, just from some of the efficiencies in the production of this product. Also, taste. I mean, if if the eaters of the world do not like the product, it's not going to be adopted. That's pretty straightforward. And then the last one being convenience. This needs to be not available to a small niche group of society. This needs to be available across the board, regardless of where somebody is on the planet. The other thing that's really critical that I've learned is that this industry of alternative proteins is very context sensitive. So I do a lot of work globally within this space. And it's fascinating to hear just some of the different nuances about about how this industry will evolve in different geographies. So, for example, in the U.S., the burger is the hero category, and if I think of like the plant-based meat companies, we're typically going to be discussing soy and pea protein. Well, contrast that with the conversations I have with my friends and colleagues in the alternative protein industry in India. We're not talking about burgers. We're not talking about soy and pea protein. We're talking about mung bean, lentils, chickpeas, other pulses, those indigenous crops within their society that they readily have available. We're not talking burgers. We're talking things like kiami, birima, and kebabs. So that's what's fascinating about this. It doesn't matter where you are on the planet. These are solutions that can be developed for the local tastes of the eaters around the world. Mm. The other thing that's really fascinating is like this whole industry is interdisciplinary. It requires the collective we. No one company can do this alone. Even with the work that I do within 3M, I still rely heavily on the nonprofits in this space, with the academic community to learn, and also to connect with the researchers, to learn other disciplines of science that are now coming in that, maybe not directly involved in the food industry today, but for the food industry of tomorrow, we need these different types of science disciplines to then scale up the efforts of this space. And really what this all adds up to is that this is creating completely new career paths. I mean, the cattle rancher of the future is not going to be a cattle rancher out in where I'm based here in Nebraska. It's going to be a microbiologist, say in Singapore, who's working on new technologies. And so that's what's fascinating to see. And all you'd have to do is look at some of the job boards. Say, for example, Impossible Foods. I recently looked at the job board. There's over 120 open positions across both science, technology, and business. So it's creating new markets that have never existed before. It's creating new business models that have never existed before, which is incredibly exciting for anybody that's kind of along that STEM career path, as well as business too, because it opened up new business strategy opportunities within the space. So for any young person out there, keep a close eye on the work that this industry is doing. I would highly recommend some of the nonprofits in this space, specifically New Harvest and the Good Food Institute. They provide a lot of great educational content, and will make you very well aware of the evolving nature of this industry. So with that, I'll leave you with my contact information. By all means, if anybody has any questions, email me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to tell you a little bit more about the work within the space, and even just to get you connected within some of the players within this industry. So with that, Ricky, I will turn it back to you.
Awesome. Why don't you stop the screen share? We'll go into split mode here. All right. Very cool. So let's see. I have a number of questions here. I don't want to pick up maybe from what you're just discussing at the end there on new career paths. What I think what we're seeing, especially in the US, is even within the sustainable farming or regenerative farming movement, a lot of universities have been slow, even though, depending on what type of practice you're talking about, we've had nonprofits or certain farms that have adopted these more regenerative practices for decades, and yet a lot of our land grant universities aren't necessarily moving that way. I'm curious to hear on the alternative protein front, which is an even newer, methodology for producing protein. Are there universities that are starting to lead the way? Is there more adoption there? Is it maybe an easier sell to those universities? What are you seeing there in the kind of education space, especially higher ed?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not, all across the board where you can walk into an institution and say, hey, can I talk to your alternative protein R&D team? And, a lot of times it just doesn't exist. But what I'm finding is just, this is still a very, very close network, and everybody kind of knows everybody within this space. So there are pockets of research teams at established universities that are heavily, heavily involved in this space. It's just a matter of finding them and connecting with them, because it's certainly not mainstream yet.
Are there any specific universities that come to mind that are?
I'm trying to think of the ones that I've worked with closely so far. UCLA is doing a lot of work. Georgia Tech, University of Nebraska in Lincoln, Nebraska has done some, and then also too a lot around the world. And if you look at some of the startup ecosystems around the world, say for example, I've done a lot of work with academic institutions in Israel, in the Netherlands. Those are two examples I can really think of. So it's quickly emerging, and will probably become much more mainstream in the years ahead.
Very cool. And then, what about, and this might be a little bit more relevant to your work in the CEA and regenerative ag space, but what do you hear from, as you're talking to producers or farmers that maybe are more on the conventional end of the spectrum, but might want to shift their practices towards something a bit more modern? What are you hearing from them? What are some of the resources that they need? And what about the ones, maybe the early adopters that have broken through those barriers and already started new practices? Like, what's enabled them to do that?
Yeah, I think the best way to answer that is that's why it's so important for us to connect with the academic institutions, because you take a grower, for them to allocate a large area just for their own personal R&D. I mean, that's pretty high risk for these growers. I mean, they don't, just their nature is not to, evolve quickly. They will evolve if you can show them the data. And what better place to connect with data, specifically third-party independent data, than with academic institutions. And so that's kind of my approach when connecting with the academics, is that, I just want your feedback on this, just to see, because we're still in the R&D phase with some of these products. Please test these solutions. Then if we have something tangible, not anecdotal, but something that's pretty well planned out over multiple growing seasons, then we can start to introduce that to the established growers. And that seems to be an approach that works very effectively, because that it makes them feel better with making that adjustment.
So you're really this sort of connective figure, right? Both internally with 3M, connecting a lot of these scientists that might be doing some of this R&D, in locations around the world, but you're also doing this out in the field a bit, right? Connecting maybe some of these producers with R&D that's happening at universities and in labs.
That's it. That's the approach.
What's that been like? I mean, has that been fun for you? Is it a lot of pressure? Do you find that you're constantly having to connect people, and does it sometimes feel unproductive, or do you enjoy it?
No, I mean, I think that, with anybody that's in the space and in what capacity, it's not hard to have intrinsic motivation for what these solutions provide. So by no means, it's one of those just perfect challenges where, it's an insane amount of work. But when you look at the long tail impact of this, it's really easy to stay highly motivated. So no issues at all.
Very cool. I feel similarly, by the way. So I know a lot of the stuff that you're working on is still kind of in R&D phase. So there's a lot that you can't necessarily discuss, but if there's anything that you can discuss within either alternative proteins, but also CEA and regenerative ag, what are some of the things that you're getting really excited about that might move towards commercialization within 3M?
Yeah, I mean, I'll look at one that's a product portfolio in 3M that's already closely aligned with the protein industry is food safety. But it's making adaptations to that, because if you look at where in the world these alternative proteins are really becoming in high demand, it's in those countries that are modernizing. India, China, they don't typically have, especially out in the rural areas, have the most robust supply chains. So from a food safety standpoint, how do we adapt our technologies from that just to monitor the cold storage wherever that can be made available? Also to looking at different types of packaging solutions to extend shelf life, but also packaging solutions that are sustainable. So with a lot of these countries now moving towards a ban of single-use plastics, what does that base material look like? So those are some of our near-term projects that I'm really excited about.
Any specific examples you can give on that front?
Not yet, unfortunately, but very close. More to come on that.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, just the other thing I wanted to point out is I really think it's important that the fact that you pointed out inclusive solutions, learning from conventional meat producers. I mean, I just think it's such an important topic right now. AGRITECTURE is based in New York City, but in the broader New York State, we have a lot of dairy producers, and they've been hit really, really hard. I know you're from Minnesota, right? I'm sure there's similar sort of there in Wisconsin for the dairy industry is struggling as well. And I think it's difficult because there is so much investment moving towards the alternative protein space, and it's easy for those farmers, I'm sure, to feel like they're getting left behind. And you see protesters, and you understand because there is urgency from a climate change standpoint. Just cattle alone, right, I think makes up about 14% of total greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. So we do need to urgently shift our production methods, but it's just so important that we don't leave those producers behind, right? Because that's where there's going to be tension. That's where there's going to be ongoing conflict for decades. And so, I wanted to say that I wanted to point out that I think it's so important that you are talking to those producers still and including them in the conversation.
I think one of the most undervalued skill sets in this space are patience, kindness, and empathy. Just hearing people and learn about what their history is in conventional agriculture, and how it's been such an ingrained part of whether it's their community or their family. That's important to learn all about that and know that there are going to be tough situations. So it's not a simple solution by any means.
Awesome, Don. Well, that is kind of all of my questions. Anything that you want to leave the audience with? Any specific people that might be watching that you'd want to reach out to you? Why don't you leave the audience with a couple of things to think about?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a college student in pretty much any area of science and engineering, and hearing this topic sparks your curiosity, those are the people I want to connect with. I want to connect with those that have that natural curiosity for this space and have a discipline that could lend to that, because we need a colossal Manhattan project within this space to bring these solutions to commercial reality. So by all means, connect with me in any way.
Great. And what's your prediction? Let's make one prediction. 5 years from now or 10 years from now, how do you think the eating landscape is going to look? What's going to be really different?
Yeah, I mean, a couple ways to think about this. If we look at specifically the plant-based meat industry, I kind of use the growth of the non-dairy milk industry as a proxy for that. So if you look at those growth trends, it's not hard to see how that space is going to continue to gain share. My hope is that by that point, we'll at least see some of the first couple of cell-based animal protein products at a commercial scale, even if it's just a very small pilot level commercial scale. That's what I'm most excited about over the next 5 years. And really, it's one of those things, like if we look 5 years out and the changes in this space are so phenomenal, there's no way that we could have possibly predicted that today. That's probably the ideal solution.
Great. All right, Don. Well, thanks for your time, and thanks for all the extra effort you've been putting in at 3M around the COVID-19 response. As your email is on that last slide, right? So people can reach out.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to end the recording. We can stick around for a little bit and chat a bit more. But thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.